In the modern world, power no longer comes from land, armies, or even money. It comes from systems, algorithms quietly deciding what people see, buy, believe, and become. These systems are built in glass offices, reviewed by elite panels, and trusted without question. But occasionally, the system fails. Not loudly, not publicly. It simply begins to lose ground. This is a story of an algorithm that was never meant to matter, created far from Silicon Valley, rejected without debate, and quietly adopted anyway, until it replaced the very system that dismissed it. The story begins, as many do, with an email that received no reply. It was sent from a small, rented workspace in Manila, addressed to a venture-backed technology consortium based in Northern California. The subject line was unremarkable. Inside was a white paper proposing a new optimization algorithm designed to manage large-scale decision systems, content ranking, logistics forecasting, behavioral prediction. The sender did not have a famous university affiliation, no previous exit, no Silicon Valley mentor. What he had was a system that worked differently. The engineer behind the proposal was Filipino, trained partly in formal computer science and partly through years of applied work in Southeast Asia's informal digital economy. He had spent a decade watching platforms fail users at scale, traffic systems collapsing, content platforms amplifying conflict, supply chains breaking under pressure. His conclusion was simple but unfashionable. Most dominant algorithms were too rigid, too confident. They optimized for short-term accuracy, not long-term stability. His system prioritized adaptability over speed, correction over confidence. When the proposal was reviewed internally by the Silicon Valley Consortium, it lasted less than 7 minutes. Notes from the meeting, later reconstructed, described the approach as statistically inefficient and theoretically inelegant. One reviewer noted that the algorithm appeared to sacrifice precision for resilience, a trade-off considered unnecessary given existing models. The decision was swift. No follow-up questions. No request for testing. The rejection was polite, automated, and final. The system would not be considered. What the reviewers did not ask was where the algorithm had already been used. In parts of Southeast Asia, it had quietly been tested across fragmented data environments, local transport routing, regional content moderation, decentralized marketplaces. Environments where data was incomplete, noisy, and constantly changing. Places where conventional models failed unpredictably. The Filipino engineer had designed his system not for ideal conditions, but for chaos. And chaos, increasingly, was becoming the global norm. After the rejection, there was no public response, no online campaign, no expose. The engineer did what many outside elite systems do. He moved on. Through professional contacts, the algorithm was licensed informally to a mid-sized European logistics firm struggling with volatility across emerging markets. The company never announced a partnership. Internally, the algorithm was simply labeled an experimental redundancy layer, running parallel to their main optimization system. At first, the results were subtle. The system did not outperform existing models during stable periods. It did not promise dramatic efficiency gains. What it did was correct itself faster during anomalies. When shipping data arrived late or corrupted, it adapted. When demand forecasts shifted abruptly, it recalibrated without cascading failures. Engineers noticed fewer emergency overrides, fewer unexplained crashes. The system did not dominate performance metrics. It stabilized them. Meanwhile, back in Silicon Valley, the dominant algorithm faced growing pressure. Its predictions were still accurate until they weren't. Small deviations began producing disproportionate failures. Content ranking systems amplified unintended behaviors. Automated logistics platforms required increasing human intervention. Fixes were deployed, but each fix added complexity. Each patch reduced transparency. Internally, engineers began referring to the system as brittle, a term rarely used in investor briefings. As performance issues mounted, a quiet internal search began, not for revolutionary ideas, but for supplemental systems, fallback mechanisms that could absorb uncertainty without breaking. Consultants were hired, academic partnerships announced. No one publicly acknowledged that the core architecture itself might be the problem. Within this search, a European logistics case study surfaced. It showed unusual stability under extreme variance. The underlying algorithm was unnamed. When engineers requested technical details, they were surprised. The system used fewer parameters, not more. It deliberately introduced controlled inefficiency to prevent overfitting. It treated uncertainty not as noise to eliminate, but as a signal to manage. One internal memo described it as counterintuitive but operationally effective. Another noted that it violated several accepted optimization assumptions, yet continued to perform. The source of the algorithm was traced back to its creator, a name unfamiliar to Silicon Valley circles, a background without elite markers. The original rejection resurfaced in internal archives. No one referenced it publicly. Instead, the system was evaluated under a different label, integrated into a closed testing environment. Officially, it was an internal innovation. Unofficially, it was borrowed. Deployment began quietly, not as a replacement, but as an auxiliary layer. It monitored system health, flagged instability, and suggested adaptive corrections. Over time, engineers noticed something uncomfortable. The auxiliary system often outperformed the primary one during critical moments. In simulations involving cascading failures, it prevented collapse more reliably. Discussions shifted. What began as a backup was now being trusted with core decisions. No announcement was made. No press release issued. The transition happened incrementally. System modules were reassigned. Responsibilities transferred. Eventually, the original algorithm still existed, but no longer controlled outcomes. It had become ceremonial. The Filipino design system was now embedded deep within the infrastructure, invisible to users, unnamed in documentation, but indispensable. Outside the company, no one noticed. Performance improved. Crises became less frequent. Investors were satisfied. The narrative of internal innovation remained intact. The engineer in Manila was never contacted. His system had been licensed indirectly, absorbed through intermediaries, legally compliant, ethically ambiguous, functionally decisive. Only later, through industry whispers and leak performance analyses, did the story begin to surface, not as a scandal, but as a curiosity. An algorithm developed outside traditional power centers had succeeded where elite systems struggled, not by being faster or smarter, but by being humbler, by assuming it could be wrong. The engineer eventually learned of the adoption, not through recognition, but through replication. Variations of his design principles began appearing in academic papers, stripped of context, reframed as novel discoveries. He did not contest them. He had never designed the system for prestige. It was built to survive complexity, and complexity now defined the digital world. In interviews years later, Silicon Valley leaders spoke broadly about the importance of resilience, adaptability, and decentralized intelligence. They framed it as an evolution, rarely as a correction. The original rejection was never mentioned. Institutional memory has a way of editing discomfort out of its narratives. Yet the system remains, quietly adjusting decisions that affect millions. Not perfect, not dominant by name, but structurally central. Its logic embedded so deeply that removing it would destabilize everything it now supports. Replacement, in this case, did not arrive through confrontation. It arrived through necessity. This story is not about failure or triumph in the traditional sense. It is about how power evaluates ideas and how often it mistakes familiarity for superiority. The algorithm was never rejected because it didn't work. It was rejected because it didn't look like it belonged. Today, similar systems are emerging from places still considered peripheral, built not in ideal conditions but in constraint, designed not to dominate, but to endure. Most will be ignored, some will be absorbed, few will be credited, but their influence will grow regardless. The lesson is not that Silicon Valley was wrong. It is that no system, no matter how advanced, is immune to blind spots, especially when authority becomes comfortable, especially when success feels inevitable. The algorithm that replaced their system did not announce itself. It did not seek validation. It simply worked until it could not be removed. And in a world increasingly governed by invisible systems, That may be the most disruptive force of all, because the future does not always belong to those who are first, loudest, or most celebrated. Sometimes, it belongs to those who build quietly, where no one is looking. This story, like many others, is fictional, but the dynamics it reflects are not. Ideas are still being dismissed every day. Some of them will replace the system that ignored them, and when they do, no announcement will be made.